I'm so sorry. Well, I just going to present today something on conservation medicine. And I'm going to give the example of Ethiopia as a case study. So we know Ethiopia by several connotations, such as the water tower of Africa and the roof of Africa. And those two connotations are simply enormous and strictly interlinked. So we know that Ethiopia is the only country in Africa with an Afro-Alpine ecosystem, and that gives them uniqueness of a huge number of endemic species. And one of the biggest examples of that
really
richness of biodiversity.
Can we?
Hello?
Sir? We can't hear him when you guys are speaking. Go ahead.
So the biggest example of that biodiversity is actually the Bali Mountains. So which is a UNESCO heritage site since last year, and probably the place in the planet with the highest number of endemic species by square kilometer. So the highlands, which is the highest point, it's the plateaus. They are extremely specialized ecosystems with tremendous biodiversity, extremely adapted, and with a huge variety of rodents, which create a lot of galleries on these plateaus. And when the rains come, they infiltrate and originate about 14 major rivers. But despite the huge resources of water that Ethiopia has, about 60% of Ethiopia is dry land. And they are a country that is extremely sensitive to climate change. So we are a small NGO working in Ethiopia since 2020. We started immediately before the COVID pandemic started and before the civil war actually started. So it was a particularly challenging period to start the NGO there. And our main objective is to create the Ethiopian Wildlife Veterinary Services. So we work under the umbrella of the Prime Minister's office. We establish partnerships with federal organizations, with regional organizations, and with local NGOs. And the first step to actually initiate this very highly specialized service was to select 3 young veterinarians. We are an NGO specializing in providing veterinary services. And for that, we put together a conservation medicine course, which was a unique course established in the place in the Horn of Africa. We had about 1,000 students, and 30 of those were present in classes that were run by us, which allow us to actually match a lot of those students in loco, see their motivation, see their passion and drivenness, and we select 3 of those to initiate this veterinary service. The second step, and probably the most interesting one, was capacitating those veterinarians. We did it already with rotations in several countries, in Namibia, Somaliland, India, and in Ethiopia. And we focus our attention on several disciplines. One of the most important was pathology. So how to investigate, events of animals to die. So why? What was the reason? Was that an outbreak? Is that of certain concern? How to collect proper samples to actually make a definitive diagnosis? The other one was clinical. So X-rays was to operate the X-ray machine. to monitor an animal under anesthesia and how to anesthetize the different species of individuals or species that are present in Ethiopia, to use ultrasounds. And here we are using ultrasounds in some of the last captive black maned lions, which is the symbol of Ethiopia, and to assess their reproductive capacity. And here is our team rotating in another project that we run in India, which is the largest rehabilitation center in the world, which has also the largest elephant hospital. And we are rotating them to different disciplines like anesthesia. So I'm just going to show you a little video of a standing sedation on an elephant, where we maintain the animal completely asleep standing, and we are performing, in this particular case, a reproductive evaluation of the uterus of a adult female Asian elephant, which had an endometritis, which is an infection of the uterus. So we can see that everybody has their own functions, some collecting information about the anesthesias, others, just operating the equipment of the endoscope, and another team doing ultrasounds on the same. So on the same go, we try to take as much information as possible, and that's pretty much what we try to tell to our training people. So here is in the day that they complete their training in India, just before being deployed in Ethiopia, where they had to deal with several clinical cases, which I will pass some of the most important ones and explain a bit the One Health issue that those have been involved to. So one of them was in Bali Mountain, where is the distribution area of the Ethiopian wolves and the mountain yalas. So I'm going to start by the most endangered carnivore in the continent, which is the Ethiopian wolf. There is only 450 individuals present in Ethiopia. That's the only country where they are. And they are, the population fluctuates dramatically every time there is an event of rabies or distemper. Ethiopia is still the country in the world with the highest number of rabies in humans per capita. And Ethiopian wolves are one of the species that is most affected by rabies and distemper. They are spillover by feral dogs that live in the local communities around the national parks. They interact normally very negatively with the Ethiopian wolves. Is here a case where we have to amputate one of the posterior legs from the alpha male of one of the packs. This animal survived, and this event was 3 years ago, and this animal is still with the pack. So it was a particularly successful story, but just give us an idea how negative feral dogs can be, not only for some of the most endangered species like Ethiopian wolves, but also for people. And so one of our functions is to implement vaccination to the Ethiopian wolves and obviously to the feral dogs as well. Another species that is amazing in the Bali Mountains is the mountain yala. It's one of the rarest antelopes in the world, endemic to the Afro-Alpine ecosystem, and obviously the unique place where they live is Ethiopia. There is 4,000 of these individuals, and here is one that in 2021 had a snare around the horns. We had to go in an emergency base to Bali Mountains to snare these animals, and we found 4 individuals with the same problem. So this reflects the interaction with the negative interaction with local communities. So they normally ride the crops of the local communities by night, and we are just going to initiate very soon radio coloring of these species just to monitor their interactions with local communities, whereabout they happen, which are the crops that are most favorable, and try to mitigate as much as possible this problem and avoid as much as we possibly can spillover of diseases from domestic animals to these very dangerous ruminants. Leopards is another animal that we deal very frequently. Leopards are particularly dangerous to deal with. So they are extremely adaptable, but extremely difficult to capture. And they are particularly aggressive when they are injured. So we normally catch leopards by night, which is a particularly dangerous operation. I have to say that leopards are probably the most dangerous animal to capture. And occasionally their interaction with human populations is pretty traumatic. So this is a gene trap that just got stuck here a paw, and there is still some parts of the paw in this gene trap. This animal escaped, and we managed to capture it. And normally these captures involve the local communities. So a lot of these animals live in peri-urban environments. And obviously when we're going to capture these animals involves areas that are very highly urbanized, and there is normally a gathering of a lot of people on this operation. So it's simply unavoidable. So the animals are normally sedated during these periods. We take them to rehab, and then if the animal is rehabable, we basically release them back to nature. And we normally, when we release to nature, we deploy as well radio collars, and we follow the animal. And from all the animals that we rehab until now, none of them create any additional problems to any. So they are extremely adaptable. These principles we could not adapt for lions or any other big cat, but leopards seem to be particularly adaptable. And when they are traumatized, they try to avoid the source of that trauma as much as possible. So the other case study is the cheetahs. So Ethiopia has 60% of their country's dry land, so perfect environment for cheetahs. But unfortunately, the Middle East is and the social media phenomenon is asking a lot of pet cheetahs, and they are harvested from nature. They are in very, very poor conditions, where 90% of them eventually perish, and the remain arrive to the Middle East to become social media celebrities until they become a problem, and they are killed by the guardian or eventually given to a local zoo or to a sanctuary. So normally the pastoralist tribes collect these animals. They raise these animals until they are tame, and then when they are tame, they are passed across the border to Somaliland, and from there to the Middle East. So the conditions where they are transported is pretty bad. So I don't know if you can see this empty water container. They cut it, and then they put the animals inside, and they travel for many days. So the animals get very dehydrated, and they hardly survive this trip. The other case study that we have recently been involved is crocodiles. We have been found more and more frequent crocodiles in this state. I don't know if you can see, but this is an extremely emaciated crocodile. And in the areas where we find these crocodiles, normally we find as well a higher number people being eaten by crocodiles. The reason for that, as far as we could collect information, is that they simply starve. They don't have anything to eat, and they just emaciate to the point that they're extremely weak. So this is the exploitation to the point that there is no fish in the river for this predator to feed on. So here is a very extremely weak crocodile. And the other case study that I would like to mention is the black maned lions. So this animal is the symbol of Ethiopia. And in Addis Ababa and other local zoos around the country, they are kept in very old-fashioned enclosures. So this is Sidishkilo Zoo in Addis Ababa. These animals are maintained in pretty bad conditions. They eventually suffer for a lot of diseases, some of them transmitted by the public. We, with permission from the municipality and the federal conservation organization, we start trying to relocate these animals to much better conditions. So for that, we anesthetize all the individuals. We did physical examinations in all of them. Here we are doing some X-rays on a male lion. Here we are sedating and collecting samples to basically do a proper health evaluation. Another female that we had evaluate, there was some animals with extremely long nails that were penetrating the paws. So just because they were kept in particularly bad conditions over so many years. Here, a very old individual that were not suitable to be moved anymore. So we collect all the samples, we do the physical examination of that, and then we determine which individuals are movable. And we establish two populations in Addis Ababa, one in Peacock Zoo and another one in Unity Zoo, where they are in a much more natural environment and possible for the people to see animals in a much better environment, being the symbol of Ethiopia in their majestic capacity, and obviously being away from the public with less contact. The other case study is hyenas. We know that hyenas are very common in Ethiopia, especially in peri-urban environments. So they are seen mostly at night. We are initiating some health evaluation on the populations of hyenas in peri-urban environments. And Ethiopia is a particularly interesting case because it's probably the only country in Africa where the cohabitation between this predator and humans is still very possible. So they are extremely important as garbage removal. So they consume a lot of food disposal, a lot of animals that eventually are injured or sick around the cities where they are abandoned by their guardians. And Ethiopia being the 10th country in the world with the highest population of both horses and domestic hoofstock. So there is plenty of food for these animals, and the interaction between them and humans is quite friendly, even though there is occasional situations where hyenas can eat a child or eventually an older person or two intoxicated individuals that just fell asleep in the streets, but they are extremely occasional. So other animals that when they eat in the garbage, they can eventually interact with that in a very negative way. This is a Fanta cap that has been lodged in the palato of this wild dog and had to be captured to be removed. So garbage can obviously affect wildlife in many, many ways, but this was a particularly unusual case that we had. And the other study that we are initiating is health clinical health evaluation of wild stock. So this was never done in Ethiopia before, and this is the first step to start studying the wild populations of the national parks, seeing how prevalent is certain diseases in those populations, how negatively they can be affected, and from where they came. So this is the first time that we are studying this. So this is the swine hartebeest. It's an endemic species in Ethiopia, only exists in 2 protected areas, and both populations are declining. So the reason for their declining is probably the negative interaction with domestic hoof stock, but we don't know exactly what is that. It's just competing with resources, or there is any disease that occasionally originate outbreaks that negatively affect the dynamic of these populations. So we anesthetize most of these animals. We safely take samples, and then with the appropriate antidotes, we reverse the anesthesia of these animals in a very safe way. So here is a swine hartebeest waking up from an anesthesia, and here he goes. And I would like to thank you very much. So if there is any questions, thank you.